Okay, we are live. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a session on nutrition in pregnancy: eating too much versus eating less. How much is right? We're glad to have Dr. Rajsri Shankar among us today to help us understand this topic. This is an essential topic in nutrition of children, and it's essential to try to understand this topic very well. So the doctor is going to take us through this topic, and she's going to help us with a lot of interesting, informative information. So, doctor, you have the session.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it gives me great pleasure to actually be interacting with you all during National Nutrition Week. Um, Nutrition in pregnancy is actually something that is often discussed, but I think there are big gaps uh, in how much people actually understand about how they should be eating in pregnancy. And a lot actually comes down to how we normally eat. I think the basics are very, very simple, but I think we tend to get it complicated in our mind. So I just thought we will talk about how do you normally plan eating in pregnancy. It is not a complicated issue at all. So I want to break it down to simple things so you can actually make a plan for yourself on how to eat. Now, the whole the reason why I brought up this topic of saying that we should be thinking about eating right. Are we eating too much? Are we eating too less? Are we eating the right things? Are we eating enough for the development of the baby? These are all questions that come up all the time in during my interaction with my patients. So let us think this way. Now, what are we eating for? What is nutrition? Why do we normally eat food? And bringing it down to it's down to a basic thing. We need food to provide calories for our daily activity. This is all food is for. um, and the basic components of food are three main things. Now you have energy foods, you have foods that are essential for building up our protein and maintaining the health of our bones. You have foods that have to help to give us immunity to fight infections. So the most important function of food is basically to provide energy for the body for all our day-to-day activities. And if you want to break down food into different food groups, now it's the main food, energy giving foods are the carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. Now, carbohydrates are the essential part of food because this is the food that actually gives you instant energy. So, if you're a person who does a lot of active work, then you should be thinking of eating a bit more carbohydrate. Now, for people who are not so active, then your carbohydrate can be brought down. Then you have your second type of foods, which is protein, which helps in building up your muscles and also strengthens your body. Protein is also a source of energy, but it's released much slower in your body. So for people who are actually not actually having a lot of regular activity, for them eating carbohydrate can be less and their protein intake can be higher. And the last component of the foods that we were talking about is fats. Now, people also want to know what is carbohydrate, where do you get your protein, where do you get your fat from? Now, it's easier to know where you get your fat sources from. That's basically your oils and your ghee and all that give you the fat part of your diet. But protein and carbohydrate can actually be a mix of foods. Most foods that we eat have a combination of carbohydrate and protein. Now, the simplest things way to look at it is our major component of food is basically either rice or wheat. Now, these are your main carbohydrate giving foods. They also have a certain amount of protein in them, but they are the main source of carbohydrate in your diet. Now, if you're looking at protein, your protein your protein component of food comes from your beans, your lean meat like your chicken and fish. These are the sources of protein. But you will have a mix of these foods also having protein and carbohydrate. But looking at basic things, your rice and chapati give you the main source of carbohydrate. Your meats and your dals and your seeds, all these give you sources of protein in your body. Now, how do you decide how much of what to eat? Now we have looked at in studies done in the past, we've seen that how much requirement is essential in pregnancy. Now let's come back to what women should be eating in pregnancy. Now the normal calorie intake for women is about 1,500 calories a day. So this is all that women should be eating. The tendency that we are seeing nowadays is that the calorie intake is much much higher, and although we are eating more calories, we're actually eating the bad kind of calories. So actually the intake from bad foods, which normally is foods in the form of sugar, which basically get converted to fat in the body, is much much higher nowadays in diets across all age groups, including women and also in pregnant women. And there is this concept that once you get pregnant, you just have to start eating for two, which actually even increases the already higher calorie intake that we are actually seeing in women nowadays. So the first thing is, in pregnancy, you do not have to eat for two. There are certain foods that you have to increase quantity of, but you do not have to start eating double the quantity. Now, the simple rule of thumb here is that for the first 3 months of pregnancy, you do not have to take any additional calories. You can continue maintaining your normal calorie intake. And how much should a woman normally eat? I'm even not talking of pregnancy nowadays. I'm talking of all women when you plan how much you should be eating. And if you're thinking of pregnancy, how much you should be eating, all comes down to how much your BMI is. And your BMI is basically an estimate of your height and your weight. Now, there is a BMI calculator that is available everywhere. So just go on the net and calculate your BMI. So check what your height is, check what your weight is, and you can work out your BMI for yourself. Now, if the normal BMI is between 20 to 25. So if you're in that normal weight range, I will tell you how much you should be gaining in pregnancy. If you're actually underweight, how much you should be gaining, and if you're overweight, how much weight you should be putting on. Now, if you're in the normal weight range, normal BMI range, pre pregnancy, then the weight gain that you should be aiming for in all through pregnancy is only about 12 to 14 kgs, nothing more. And again, if your weight is your BMI is in the lower range, which is less than 18, then you have to be looking at increased weight gain in pregnancy. You can even put on up to 18 to 20 kgs in pregnancy. Now, coming to our more the higher group of women that we are seeing in practice, where their BMI is more than 25, it depends on how much obesity is there. Now, if somebody has a BMI more than 30, then your weight gain should not be more than 5 kgs from the beginning till the end of pregnancy. So now this gives us an idea how much we should be eating in pregnancy itself in the different stages of pregnancy. Now, during the first 3 months of pregnancy, weight gain is not at all necessary. And this I'm talking for women in the normal weight range. And also for women in the overweight range, you should not be thinking of putting on any weight for the first 3 months. And even if you lose 1 or 2 kgs, that is all right. It doesn't affect the development of the baby. Now, going on to the second trimester that we are looking at from about 14 to 20, 14 to 28 weeks, the weight gain that you should, how much you should be eating is you should only be eating about 300 extra calories a day. Like I said, we are talking again about women in the normal weight range. You should only be eating about 300 extra calories a day. And going into the last part of pregnancy, from between 28 and 36 weeks, you should be eating another 400 calories extra a day. That is sufficient for the baby's growth and development. And during the last few weeks of pregnancy, you do not need to be eating any extra calories at all. So your basic calorie intake at that time should be sufficient for the last few weeks of pregnancy. Now, this is the simple way to actually calculate how much you should be eating. Now, how much is each how many calories do you get from each kind of food? There are lots of apps that are available nowadays that tell you how many calories are there in most Indian foods. For example, an idli, if you're looking at a 60 gram weight of one idli, then you're looking at a calorie of about 50 calories. Now, if you're looking at one chapati, about the same, using the same amount of wheat, which is about 60 grams, then you're looking at a calorie of about 60 calories. A dosa with the same amount can give you about 100 to 120 calories depending on how much oil you have used for the dosa. So there are calculators that are available in the form of apps where you can actually start working out how much calorie is there in your foods. And the basic thing now is to look at all your common foods and kind of get an idea for yourself how much is actually there in the foods that you eat. And this is simple. I mean, the initial part you might have to think a lot and plan your daily intake of food through the day by looking at the app and working out how many calories you need through the day. But as you keep going on, it becomes I mean, you automatically know how much you should be eating because now you've already worked out how many calories are there in each food that you eat. Most of us eat the same kind of foods. We don't eat 100 different varieties of food. If you are eating home food, the simple thing is if you're eating home foods, then it's very easy to keep a tab on how much you're eating and what you're actually eating and whether you're getting all the nutrition in your diet. It's only when you start eating outside foods that it becomes very difficult to actually know how much you're eating. So do limit the amount of outside foods that you eat, and that is even when you're not pregnant. But definitely in pregnancy, this will definitely help to maintain your weight in the normal range. Now, why is it so important to maintain your weight in the normal range? Number one, if you're underweight, then you need that extra weight that you put on to help the normal growth and development of the baby. If you're overweight, if you're actually overeating in pregnancy on top of starting pregnancy as overweight, you end up with a higher risk of developing diabetes in pregnancy. You have a higher risk of developing blood pressure issues in pregnancy. You end up having a much bigger baby, all of which also reduces your risk of having a normal delivery and increase your chances of having a cesarean section. So, for all these reasons, it's definitely important to focus on how much you're eating in pregnancy. Now, the main talk so far I have given you is mainly about how many calories you should be eating, but this is not everything about nutrition that you should be having in pregnancy. This is a big part of it, trying to find out how much you should be eating. But the other important thing also you should know is you should be eating more protein in your diet in pregnancy. Again, that is for the development of the baby's muscle. That will also help to improve the baby's immunity also. Additionally, you should be eating at least 4 to 5 portions of vegetables and fruits in your diet every day. And vegetables and fruits play a very important role to give you enough fiber in your diet to prevent constipation, which a lot of pregnant women are prone for. And also, eating enough vegetables and fruits gives you enough minerals and nutrients that are all essential. Which brings me to the three most important minerals or nutrients that we need to talk about that pregnant women should make sure that they're taking enough of. The first thing that we need that women, pregnant women should be taking, especially in the first part of pregnancy, is folic acid. And most women are prescribed a supplement of folic acid in pregnancy, which is very important for reducing the incidence of spine problems, spine developmental problems in the baby. So, taking folic acid for all pregnant for all women when they start to plan pregnancy and definitely in the first 3 months of pregnancy is very essential. The second mineral that's very, very important in pregnancy is calcium. Calcium, I would club it with vitamin D as well because they both are essential for the for good bone development, and that is for both for the pregnant mother and for the baby. Taking enough calcium in the diet is very important. Natural sources, of course, for calcium are dairy products and meat, but supplementation because our foods do not contain sufficient amount of calcium. Most pregnant women get prescribed a supplement of calcium, which is about 1,000 milligrams a day, in addition to vitamin D of about 600 international units a day. This, I think, as a supplement, is very essential for all women to take all the way through pregnancy. Now, the third important mineral that women also need in pregnancy is iron. Most Indian women are anemic. They start pregnancy with a low iron level. So it's really important that we supplement iron in pregnancy. Now, iron plays a very important role in the development for the baby. It's a very important mineral that helps in transporting oxygen in the body. So, which is essential both for the pregnant mother and for the baby. Iron is also essential for immunity. So, it's very essential that we have eat foods which are rich in iron, which is basically our green leafy vegetables. You can eat dates too. These are all natural sources of iron. But the non-vegetarian sources are better because it's easier for our body to absorb from it, which is red meat. But just be careful when you're eating red meat, especially when you're overweight, because it also has a lot of fat in it. So these are the four main minerals that we talk about. There are other minerals that are necessary in very small quantities, but if you eat enough quantity of vegetables and fruits, you should be getting all your sources of minerals from these itself. So supplements, you only need iron and calcium and vitamin D. Everything else you should be getting it from your diet itself. So, like I said earlier, always go back to thinking about what you're eating in pregnancy, starting from what your actual weight is before pregnancy. Calculate from there, get an idea of how much carbohydrate, protein, and fat you should be eating. The general rule of thumb is if you take a plate, you're in the normal weight range, then your carbohydrate, which is your rice or chapati, should be half the plate. Then in the other half, you should have protein, which will form half the plate. And in the other half, you should have enough of your vegetables and fruits in the other half of the plate. So this is generally what your plate should look like. Of course, you're going to be adjusting depending on how much activity you're doing. For example, if you're actually going to be in bed a lot of the time and not doing regular activity, then you can reduce your quantity of your rice and chapati even further, but maintain taking your protein and your vegetables as usual. So this is a general rule of thumb. For people who are actually very overweight and they get pregnant, it's very, very difficult to lose weight. We did never advise losing weight in pregnancy. But for these women, it's especially difficult because it's difficult to start cutting down on what they normally eat. So for these women, I gently say try to substitute your carbohydrate with a lot of vegetables and fruit now, or and protein. So start taking more egg white. Do not take the yellow part of the egg. Make sure you take a bowl of vegetable with every meal. Starting from your breakfast, start with a bowl of vegetable with every meal. And another way to actually, reduce hunger would be to eat a bowl of chickpeas, or different mix it up with different types of lentils, so eat a lot of these kind of foods which are protein rich, which will release energy slowly and will also keep your hunger at bay for a much longer time. Drink lots of water. Water is a very essential part of nutrition. Also, it helps in lots of things. It helps in transporting minerals in your body. It helps in preventing constipation. It helps preventing urine infections. So take an adequate amount of water. And how much water you take also depends on the kind of weather that you are, that in the place where you stay, whether you are an indoor person or an outdoor person. But the general rule of thumb is you should be taking at least a liter and a half of water every day. Of course, if you're outside in the sun for long periods of time, you should be taking more water in that kind of situation. So um, I it would be good to look at apps like Healthify Me, which will give you some idea about the calories in different foods, and get an idea of that will give you an idea about how to go about planning your diet. Now we do have dietitians who will be also able to help you with how to go about planning your diet in pregnancy. So do consult a dietitian if you find that it is difficult for you to get an idea how much you should be eating. And nutrition should also be part of the discussion when you actually see your obstetrician in early pregnancy. And this should actually carry on all the way through pregnancy. But a lot of it also, I think, comes down to how much you actually start looking at your own eating habits. And always, nutrition should always be combined with exercise for to actually strengthen your body more so you have a healthy pregnancy. So I hope with all this information, I've given you a general idea about how to go about planning your diet for pregnancy. Um, I'm open to taking questions now. If you have any questions that you would like to ask me about specific things, we can go on to that. Are there any questions? That's great. That's great. So I wish you all a very healthy pregnancy. Do get in touch if you have any further queries that you would like me to answer. Definitely speak to your obstetrician and a dietitian too if you have any further queries. Thank you very much. Okay, I think I have a question here from Ms. Rupa asking if how would you manage severe nausea? Now, nausea in early pregnancy makes it difficult to get any nutrition. So the best way to manage nausea in early pregnancy is to eat. And I know it's a little difficult to eat when you have severe nausea, but the best way is to keep eating all through the day. So eating small portions every hour, even if you have vomited once, to take some more food in. And how what do you normally eat now? When you have severe nausea, you want foods that actually give you instant energy. So basically it's eating like half a slice of bread with jam on it. So you need to have something sugary to give you that instant energy. So what I normally suggest is eat every half an hour, whether it's half a biscuit, two uh, two or three sips of juice, or a slice of or half a slice of bread with jam on it. Don't eat high protein foods because that would sometimes make your nausea worse. The best way to deal with nausea early in the morning is as soon as you get out of bed, do not brush. For a lot of women, brushing actually triggers of nausea. So start off with eating a couple of salt biscuits as soon as you get out of bed, and then once you get up and you're mobile, then you do your brushing later on. But the best way to manage nausea is to eat all through the day, basically eating every hour. That will give you your nutrition, and it will also keep your nausea suppressed. Of course, if the nausea is still worse in spite of doing all this, do discuss with your obstetrician about going on medication. Any other questions for me? Thank you very much. Thank you. It was nice talking to you all during Nutrition Week. Have a safe break.